Meanwhile, Ron Paul supposedly already out of the Republican race, supposedly Mitt Romney clinching the nomination, and yet, wait, hold on. Ron Paul actually won Iowa. And so the Iowa caucus leading off the GOP primary, the one that the establishment was so afraid Ron Paul might win, that they said the Iowa caucus would be discredited and no longer count if Ron Paul won. Well, now he indeed has officially won, gaining officially a majority of those delegates. There's 28 delegates in Iowa. Ron Paul over the weekend gained at least 14. More will be chosen leading into the statewide and then national conventions. He's also has a majority of delegates in Minnesota and is likely to have a majority of delegates in as many as 6 or more other states, which would contest things at the GOP delegation in August. Of course, we're not saying that Ron Paul is likely to actually get the nomination, but he's showing the fraud of the process. They definitely ripped him off. They gave him improper media coverage. They blacked him out of the media, did everything to tarnish his name, then did all kinds of election politicking, fraudulent vote counting. Who knows what happened with electronic machines? Why did he not gain votes versus 2008 numbers in Nevada, and on and on. Well, Ron Paul is just one front, and the larger fight against the establishment, you have to engage the process to show that the process is not working while pursuing other peaceful alternatives to try to rein this system in to prevent it going to the full-scale level. So that's something to watch, but they said Ron Paul couldn't win, wouldn't win. Now, in fact, he is winning. Let's go to the clip.
Worst case scenario, Ron Paul ties for first place in Minnesota. Anything better than that, he wins outright. And it should be noted, he warned us this was going to happen.
Thank you very much. When the dust settles, I think there's a very good chance that we're going to have the maximum number of delegates coming out of Minnesota.
Ron Paul was right. Nobody is getting more delegates than he did in Minnesota or in Iowa or in wherever else this Ron Paul delegate strategy of his pays off.
And so even though people like Santorum have dropped out of the race, there still is a contest within the GOP. I think it's important that Ron Paul supporters continue to make their presence known. Of course, we've covered on this show how he continues to have crowds of 5,000, 10,000 or more at his rallies, while the Romneys of the world have only a few hundred, and they have to cut the angles a certain way so they don't show that they have giant empty sports stadiums with only a few people down on the actual field. You've also got Ron Paul advisor Doug Weed commenting on the delegation process, and of course the clip you just saw on Rachel Maddow, really the only mainstream outlet to cover it now that they've pretty much alleged that the process is over and that it's this Obama versus Romney thing and blah, blah, blah. It's all staged elections. I have no faith in that process, but I think we still do need to demonstrate the process. That's not doublespeak. I just think it's important to pursue both, not get your hopes up that you're going to fix the system through rigged elections, but at the same time show that a strong candidate can have certain types of successes, show where he's been shut out of the ability to actually win, which he could have done if the media backed him, gave him a fair shot like the other controlled candidates, and if the elections themselves had been fair, if there wasn't all that fudging and whatnot. Because you have to remember, first it was Romney winning Iowa by 8 votes. 8 votes. Then a few weeks later, it was Santorum. All along, though, they had to know Ron Paul really had the delegate support, and now it's proven he has a minimum of a first-place win on the delegates for Iowa, Minnesota, and other states. Of course, Maine, one of the main states where he may have it. Meanwhile, the war on terror is over. That is, if you can believe an Obama administration official who's highlighted the fact that Obama can now safely embrace Islamicists and that activities like the Arab Spring and so forth have put a new path in the Middle East, a new way to gain popular support over there without having to fight the war against al-Qaeda. Of course, it has everything to do with the fact that through the Libyan war and now the effort in Syria to destabilize Assad, the West has openly partnered with al-Qaeda. There's the headlines right there. The West and al-Qaeda on the same side. Then in Syria, al-Qaeda and the West back the Syrian rebels, and on and on. It's just a fact. Now they're covering for it as they make frontline the war against the American people. They're still going to keep all the police state, all the TSA checkpoints that they're now rolling out to bus stops, train stops, eventually highway checkpoints, eventually malls. They've already breached sports stadiums with big events like the Super Bowl. That will all continue to expand because America must be kept, must be dumbed down under the larger sustainable development plan for population control in every sense. But in many ways, the Obama administration has moved away from the fearful exterior of the war on terror. Another aspect to it, though, the system may not be all intact on that point. They may not be giving up because just in the news, they're making big splashes over the supposed al-Qaeda plot to bomb the Long Island Railway. They've got this trial with Bryant Neal Venice, an American soldier in the Army who later converted to al-Qaeda in 2008. That's not a recipe for sheep dipping. Anyway, he supposedly wanted to bomb a Walmart and the Long Island Railroad, and now there's big fear all over the airwaves about that, even as certain Obama administration officials are saying basically the war on terror is over.